Greetings, it is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue our discussion on the various clans and bloodlines of Vampire the Masquerade. This week, I'm going to be talking about the Ventrue. Now, the Ventrue are a clan whose disciplines are dominate, fortitude, and presence, and their antediluvian is a figure known as Ventrue. Same name almost, but different spelling, one less E. They are known to be the proudest bloodline, one of the proudest bloodlines of kindred, and they are known for their impeccable honor, genteel behavior, and desire for leadership and putting themselves in charge in various positions. They consider themselves the oldest clan out of all the kindred, and the keepers of tradition, those that keep traditions alive, along with the rightful leaders of kindred society. They are known to embrace nobles, princes, and people of important positions, but though it has evolved to nowadays politicians and CEOs. They are the largest supporter of the Camarilla, putting their power behind it as much as they can. They're also avid supporters of history, whether this history is true fact or just myths based upon the ancient times of vampires where very little information stems from. It's hard to say, but they support this information spreading and keeping strong, regardless. They believe it was Cain that ordered his eldest of child, Yanosh, to embrace this character that would become known as Ventrue, though there are cases where he is called Ventrue. Both names come up in the history, but regardless of which figure is true or these two different figures, this figure was put into this almost position as an advisor to Cain himself during the time of the First City and was privy to when he was leaving this city, and for a time even was said to have been in charge of all the other antediluvians, even if it was very briefly. It is also supposition that he's probably dead, that after the fall of the second city in the flood, that the other antediluvians killed him, and that is the most common of the myths about him, though there are others that exist that do say he still exists in some way. It is more than likely he is one of the antediluvians that was slain in this matter, perhaps by one of his brethren, more than likely. Now, the Ventrue saw a great rise to power when a fourth generation Artemis was the one that founded the city of Sparta and basically set up that system of government in the way that they worked. And it led to a kind of revolution in the control of Greece and the way that Greece worked. And a lot of the other the city-states and the mannerisms and the way that things developed, including the Peloponnesian League, were under the influence of the Ventrue. This, of course, led to the first Brujah War, because the Brujahs had a lot of their connections in with Athens, who, if you know your history, were the rivals of Sparta for a lot of time. Now, when the Peloponnesian War broke out and battle between these two occurred, so did this first Brujah War occur. So this, fortunately, was not a direct conflict, that it was using these human proxies for the war, and that the result of it became this millennia-old rivalry between the Brujah and the Ventrue that exists in many minds still today. Now, when Greece and Sparta fell, they moved their way into Rome, and within Roman society they began establishing themselves as more puppet rulers rather than almost god kings above all these countries. They saw themselves not wanting to sort of put direct influence to fear of, reprisals and the stake. So their idea was to effectively set up puppets and control in a way. And this was actually a precursor for what would become the Masquerade in the future. Now, unfortunately, then the second Brujah War occurred because this became the conflict between the Ventrue and the Brujah was mirrored by the conflict between Rome and Carthage, because the Brujah had established themselves within Carthage, almost in sort of a divine source there, getting sacrifices and stuff, which the Ventrue looked down upon. This one actually did see battles occur between the two sides and forces, as the Brujah had their allies, and the Ventrue had put together a group of allies in amongst themselves. As it's been seen by history that the Ventrue and their Roman minions effectively had victory over the Carthaginians. And this is one of those blows that Brujah really hate Ventrue for, the loss of this city that was theirs effectively. Now, the Ventrue then continued to evolve their own groups, kind of evaluating the way that they were building themselves up as the Roman Empire kind of continued on and moved towards its fall. They effectively had some internal squabbles, as they also did, though, maintain good relations with the clans that helped him up against the Brujah. That's important to note, because these good relations that they often tried to keep are some of the things that kept them going throughout many of the years. But these internal struggles caused this reevaluation and kind of organization of their hierarchy that allowed for this for them better to withstand the fall of the Romans. And then they moved into becoming feudal lords and believed themselves the ones that were founders of the feudal system as it began to be established post-Roman Empire. Now, they also did, as like the Holy Roman Empire established itself, centralized themselves back into Italy. But unfortunately, by this time, the Lasombra had taken over Rome and their minions within the Catholic Church. So this rivalry between the Lasombra and the Ventrue began during moving into the Dark Ages. Now, it was of course during this time that the Camarilla was formed, and this is one of the factors that led the Lasombra to be joining with the Sabbat and forming their side, this rivalry between the two of them. Of course, there were a number of Ventrue themselves that joined with the Sabbat during this time, thinking the ones that were part of the Camarilla were on a different path than they should have been on, that they were aiming for different goals. As we move into the Victorian Age and the spread of the British Empire, we begin to see the spread of Ventrue, as the younger ones especially begin journeying out into the world. In many countries, far and wide, they spread to. And of course, there were vampires there. In Egypt, there were the Cetes. There was groups within India. And the Ventrue were oftentimes think of how the British treated the colonists where they went to. The Ventrue acted exactly the same way and caused a lot of trouble in these various countries that they would move into. Unfortunately, this attitude was becoming back and biting them in the butts at this time, and a lot of the other clans were forming this kind of hatred for them based upon these few actions. There were many that didn't want to dive into this, but those that were sort of overlording themselves, especially these young ones, were really adding a bad reputation. They used a lot of the prestige they'd been building up, and of course the fundings they'd built up, to smooth over things as much as they could and keep things fairly well settled between these rivalries with other clans, and keep things from getting really out of hand with the kind of dislike of Ventrue that was sort of an underlay throughout a lot of the kindred world at this time. Now, when we move into the last century, of course, post-World Wars, we see the rise of the Cold War, in which the Ventrue then placed themselves on either sides and effectively kept the Cold War going. They'd learned some lessons from back in the Crusades about how to play each side without causing destruction of each side, and they used that to their advantage. Unfortunately, with the fall of the Soviet bloc, those Ventrues that were within that area, the old USSR, found a lot of the power and prestige they had gone. Many of them have turned towards organized crime, so you have a large section of Ventrue related to organized crime, while on the more modern take, politicians and CEOs seem to be the take on a lot of Ventrues. Big business is a big thing for Ventrues that they move into and take over as part of this move into the modern world. Now, Ventrue believe in a very strict hierarchy, and they are proud that every member of the clan knows their place in the clan and how they relate to each other member. They've built this in a way that it isn't a top-down sort of model, that you don't have to climb the rungs effectively. What it is means based upon your ability and fortune, you can get a kind of lateral movement within the clan itself, that effectively you move through the clan using this. And this kind of system that they're using, which is not directly kind of a hierarchical, even though it is highly militaristic in a way, it allows for very young, new Ventrue that show much promise to actually be brought into a much higher position because they show this promise, very key abilities or very great fortunes. Unfortunately, this also means that a Ventrue that would lose face effectively or cause problems would lose kind of standing within the clan and lose their abilities and lose their position, I should really say. Now, their organization is based upon a bit of the Roman Republic style of government, though with a lot of the democratic, hints removed out from there. Now, the Ephrates are basically the heads of the clan. Their entire job is to appoint officials to things like the Camarilla and various locations, but really to maintain the unity of the clan across the globe. There are another of other important jobs that stem from them in the hierarchy of the Ventrue. The Strategoi are the enforcers of them. The Lictae are specialists that they bring in for various skills that they need. And the Tribae are effectively their messengers, sending out the messages that they need to the various locations and members of the clan. Now we move into the city part of the hierarchy. They have their own hierarchies within the various cities that they exist within. A city is ruled over by Grossia, basically a board of directors or a council of leaders of them, which above all of them is a praetor, or the leader of this group. And they make all the major decisions for the Ventrue in whatever city that they are within. Now, there are two kind of subsets within the Ventrue. Of course, there's the anti-tribu Ventrue, the members of the Ventrue that went to the Sabbat. But there's also another subset called the El Hajazi, which are based around Arab descent and have control over the Arabian Peninsula. They're known for having aspects instead of presence. Now, everything about Ventrue society revolves around dignitas, or dignity. They tend to practice this no excuse, no exceptions kind of policy when it comes to assisting each other because of this dignity, this dignitas, that they don't want to mess with the territories and, of course, the dignity of fellow Ventrue unless specifically requested. This means that they tend to have a close sort of hands-off when it comes to helping each other. Now, the thing next, in their traditions, the thing next to, of course, dignitas is Gent Allottee. This entire concept of how they would act and perform their lives, or unlives, I should say. And it is based upon this system of basically honor with these two aspects of themselves, that each of the members has to maintain this, and failure to do so means that you're being shunned by a lot of the other Ventrue. Now, as I said, they tend to embrace those of high standings in society, or traditionally it was nobility. More it's just now people that are in positions of power or have the potential to be in these positions that they would embrace nowadays. There is strict vetting processes that oftentimes someone that is going to be siring another will discuss with other Ventrue to find out, advise them if this person's great enough, if this person seems like they would be a great person to embrace into the Ventrue. Then the Ventrue, once embraced, will have to go through a strict, very strict learning regimen, learning all their traditions, the ways to act, the hierarchy, everything they need to know to be Ventrue. And all along the way, they will be quizzed and tested constantly at different levels and different ways in order to prove themselves worthy of effectively joining with the clan. Eventually, they will, though, go through major tests effectively in front of the heads of the clan in an area and get themselves into the position of eventually gaining true membership within the Ventrue clan. It is both a challenge and a task that they are willing to overtake once they have been embraced into this clan. It is prestigious, and they see it that way. They see those they are embracing, those nobles and those special people that they're bringing into the bloodline as being gifted the right to be a Ventrue. Now, the Ventrue have one major disadvantage, which there's arguments whether this is caused by Cain's curse to the antediluvians when they caused the problems before the flood, or whether it's just something that was unique to their bloodline. But each player who's playing a Ventrue has to choose a specific type of blood that they can only feed on. They basically are restricted to one type per vampire. This doesn't mean as a group they all have a type. It means that each one is restricted on their own, and they cannot gain sustenance from blood that does not fit within their purview is the disadvantage that they have above else. Whatever category they have chosen for their blood, that is what they need. Now, this doesn't mean that they can't imbibe vampire blood. That is perfectly fine. Now we're talking about differences in the early editions. The only thing that stands out is the anti-tribute of Ventrue in the first edition had auspex. And once we moved into the second edition, they were given the option of whether taking presence or auspex. So that is a little clue about the history of the Ventrue anti-tribute, which is a little different than your average Ventrue, that they had this option that started out as a difference between the two. So that's it for today. I introduced you to the Ventrue clan, with a mysterious antediluvian most likely dead, who is said to have been the oldest of all third generations, and led to a clan that is steeped in history and tradition, with ideals of dignity and gentlemanliness, and this honor that they believe in. This clan hierarchy that is hammered into the heads of the neonates that are born of the clan, and taught into them till they are true members of the clan and willing to fit into the order which is developed for them. So if you have any questions, comments, anything you say, anything you think I left out, please leave in comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel, the empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon. Link to the description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.